I'm a pretty big nerd about like comics and superhero movies in the last couple years because some of them are actually good. One of my favorite superheroes since I was a kid is Spider-Man. I didn't get into the comics until later, but in the last couple years, I've discovered there's some really fun ones. And but my favorite version of Spider-Man, because there's like movies and different series of comics and different games and stuff, is actually the Insomniac Spider-Man game for PS4. The reason this is my favorite version is that like Spider-Man is a Marvel superhero that there's plenty of strong people in the Marvel universe. There's plenty of people that are more acrobatic than him, that are funnier than him. I think that what the game does right about his character is his real strength comes from not only his moral compass, but also the fact that he is a scientist. And he gets most of his powers actually come from inventions that he makes. And I want to I'm using that as a connecting point to what actually does that mean to be a scientist, and why actually do I view that not as just a strength for Spider-Man in comics, but why do I think having a scientific mindset is also a great lesson to take away from that piece of media, and a great lesson that I think you can take away from this class. There's just things that you can do with scientific thinking that can make your life much easier, can make discovery easier. First, scientists are empiricists. We're going to talk a lot in the class about what does it mean to find empirical evidence for something, and why is that different than other types of evidence? Why is it a strength that Spider-Man in the comics is always testing out the strengths and weaknesses of his enemies? I mean, he's using the theory data cycle that scientists in real life use to test their own theories about how the natural world works. You have an idea of how something works, you test it out, you get data. If the data doesn't support your theory, then you find out what you did wrong, or you come up with a better theory. I mean, this helps the hero win the day, but literally is the only way for us to reliably get new information about the world. Now, in the real world, scientists can tackle different types of problems, basic and applied. Both of these are important. Basic problems in science are those that ask about maybe the basic processes through which your eyes work. But applied scientists will ask, how can we design flight systems that complement pilots and their vision, right? The basic research is, well, how exactly does color perception work in your eyes and in your brain? The applied research is, how can we use that basic color research to design computers that are easier for elderly people to use that are starting to have small vision problems. You can't have one without the other. The next lesson of a scientist is not to get simple answers and then stop. We dig deep into each problem. This is why, it's an old joke among people in PhD programs that you're going to spend 3 or 4 years of your life tackling a problem in your scientific field that contributes almost nothing to the broader knowledge of your field. But it's difficult to think of yourself as not contributing much, but what we have to recognize is that each small contribution, going really in depth on a topic, helps us to dig into questions that are more complicated than one single person can really handle. And this is kind of where I want to get away from the connections I'm making to fictional scientists and talk about something that isn't really emphasized in a lot of media. What do comics and movies get wrong about scientists? One thing they get wrong is that scientists have to make their work public. You don't see, Norman Osborn or Peter Parker in a lab making discoveries by himself for a few months and keeping them to himself. Really, what you do as a scientist is you work on a team with other people, and then you publish your work so that not just you and your team has it, but other scientists have it. This is how it works most commonly in publicly funded like universities, but it also applies to another extent to privately funded research as well. It's the norm in science for us to share our work, to have it double checked by other people, and to we share back and forth so that we can build off of the work of others as well. So scientists are constantly in a pressure to communicate their work. Speaking of that, so what is another thing that Spider-Man PS4 gets right about being a scientist? So there's not a lot of, you don't have a mini game where you're publishing your work and then getting it rejected 5 times. But one thing that does take place in the story of the game that is true to life as a scientist is Peter Parker, the smartest guy in the game, he's Spider-Man, he gets things wrong. He gets things wrong, and then the other scientist that he's working with easily sees the mistake he made. The other scientists that you're working with in the game also make mistakes. They're geniuses, and they make mistakes that are easily discovered by their colleagues. Does this mean that they were bad scientists? Absolutely not. That's not the lesson to take away from that. Why do I like teaching research methods specifically in a psychology program? Because you have to keep in mind the psychology of scientific exploration and understand that you are going to have blind spots. Just like both of your eyes have a physical blind spot where it's physically incapable of you to get input from the world in that blind spot, you have cognitive blind spots as well where you are going to miss things. You are going to make mistakes. And I think in this class, you should keep that in mind. You are going to make mistakes. You're going to miss things. That's part of the research process. That's exactly why, if you are a scientist, it's best if you work in a team. You are in grad school and you have your thesis committee. You are an undergrad and you have a team of peers or a faculty mentor that is helping you. Or you go work in private industry and you have a team leader and you have colleagues that you have to run everything by. In this class, we're going to replicate that very important. I'm opening the class with that most important lesson is you have to work with a team. Who is your team in this class? First, you got to think of me as part of your team. That's what they hired me for, okay? Keep in communication with me. If there's things you don't understand, if there's things that you think that you might miss, even if you don't think you've missed anything when you're writing the big papers and assignments for the class, the point I'm trying to get through is even the smartest guy in the room is going to make mistakes sometimes. That's just part of the process. So turn in your rough drafts as early as you can. Come stop by my office if you're in town. If you're an online student, make sure that you keep in touch with not just me, but I'm going to have information on your course website for your teaching assistants as well. If your section of this class has teaching assistants assigned to it, then you'll find a guide on the class website for which one has primary responsibility for your section of the class. You need to get in touch with them as well. Often I encourage you to get in touch with them before you get in touch with me. First of all, if your class has TAs, then the class is divided such that I manage everybody, but the TAs have smaller sections. So sometimes they have more time than I have. But also, they are content experts as well. If it's an undergraduate TA, they've been through the class recently. So they also have your perspective fresh in their mind. So they're a great resource. The grad students have more knowledge, but it's been a while since they've been in your shoes. I have even more knowledge. I've been doing this a while, but it's been a while since I've actually taken that research methods class. So there's strengths and weaknesses. Make sure to review that contact info and know how to get in touch with everybody. The next thing you should think of this as part of your team is student academic services at UND. This includes such things as disability services for students. If you have any accommodations that you want for the class, I'm always perfectly fine with giving you most things that students request. But because I like to treat each student equally when I can, I ask that you go through the disability student services so that you have some documentation that shows why I'm giving you maybe a different test taking experience or whatever it is compared to other students. Don't get stubborn and refuse to go talk to student academic services. Again, they're hired for you. They're a part of your research team. They're not an extra thing that you might have to go and deal with. What else do they have? They have tutoring services. There's veteran student services if you are a veteran, right? Those people are there for you. Go talk to them. Think of them as part of your team, okay? Most semesters, the psychology department also has their own tutor that can help you. Just find the contact info on the psychology department website or your class website for that. Now, finally, the most important part of the team, I think, is your peers, okay? There's going to be group activities in this class. I know a lot of people hate group work, but I'm going to try to keep it to a manageable minimum, but you need to get used to asking your peers for advice. Just because they're in the same class with you, that doesn't mean that you're going to have the same skill set. They're going to have different skills as you, and like I said, even the smartest guy in the room is going to miss things sometimes. If you think you're the smartest person in the room, keep in mind that you might miss something, and then, your hubris can let you forget that you can miss something. It happens to all of us, okay? Finally, I want to get back around to me. That's what they pay me for. I'm here to help you. If you think you're falling behind in the class, then you're not alone. There's going to be other people in that situation. I might have some advice for you. I might even be able to kind of change things up in the class to help you and your friends out. You got to ask though. If I don't know that you are struggling, I can't offer help because I got a lot of students, okay? I'm going to try to check in when I can, but the responsibility is on me to try to check in and be in communication with you. But half that responsibility is on you as well. Make sure that you're in touch with me and your teaching assistants and the other support staff. Think of us all as part of your research team, okay? We're here to get you successful in the class. Kind of going back to, I think I said before, what Spider-Man and what most movies and comics and everything else get wrong about being a scientist because they ignore it entirely is that after all of this collaboration with your teammates, after all of this, process of doing research, you have to share that research with other people. Because even though you've got a great research team, you might still miss things, okay? And even if you don't miss things, even if you do the research perfectly, other research teams out there might have good ideas to build upon your research. That adds to their prestige and your prestige. And we're not just talking about other scientists here. We're talking about the public, right? The public needs to know about new advances in physics and psychology and medicine and everything else because, well, what are we doing this science thing for if not for the benefit of other people in the world as well, right? For most people, that's one of their primary motivations for being a scientist, is we get to communicate it to the world. And it's cool, right? Most of the science that's being done, if you're a good communicator, then you can, show how neat it is, okay? We're going to talk in this class about there's different ways that we can communicate our science to the world. The first way for most scientists is by publishing it in a scientific journal. This is where we write up the technical, hard to follow, just for scientists version of our work. After it gets published in a scientific journal, which is always peer reviewed, in which other scientists are going to do a check of your work with you, then we might think about, getting it out there to the world, right? Sharing our knowledge with the public, sharing our knowledge with other people in popular venues. That's a part that none of the movies get right. And it's difficult, right? You got to have somebody on your team that can write, right? That's trained as a writer in order to communicate. You can be the best scientist in the world, but if you can't communicate your findings, then it's going to go badly for you. Unless we can recognize our strengths and weaknesses, and you can work with someone who can fill that part of the team for you. Now, this class, we're all going to work on our writing skills, our science communicating skills, a little bit on top of, our basic science skills as well. So the next part of being a scientist is understanding the philosophy of science. What does empiricism mean? I mentioned that a couple times. What are the building blocks of this scientific method that I keep alluding to? The more advanced stuff than what you got in middle school for the scientific method, right? We're going to save that till the next video because I've already went a little long here. The takeaway message from this video I want to be, think of me and everybody else as part of your research team. Understand that you have blind spots as a student and as a practicing or aspiring scientist, okay? Use your resources, okay? Be in touch with your peers and your instructor and everybody else. And get ready to learn this semester. Check out the syllabus and class website. I'll see you in the next video.